Chaim. Chaim, yes, a while. Chaim. Right. So this week's Parsha starts off by Hashem says to Avram, Lech Lecho me'artzecha u'mimoladecha u'mbeis avicha el haaretz asher arech. Leave your land, your birthplace, your father's home, and I will show you and you should go to the land that I will show you. Now, the obvious question is, why doesn't Hashem tell Avram which land? And Rashi says, right, the Medrash brings down that Hashem wanted to give Avram greater reward by not telling him where he's going to go. He's only going to have it revealed later. But the obvious question is, Hashem never told him. Hashem never told him where to go. We look in the Psukim, it says Avram traveled. Hashem never comes back to tell Avram where to go. Avram has to find out by himself. Avram has to figure out by himself where to go. Right? Hashem never showed Avram the land. Now, much later on in the Parsha, after Avram goes to Eretz Yisrael, goes to Egypt, comes back from Egypt, gets into a fight with Lot, separates from Lot, then Hashem suddenly appears to Avram and it says, lift up your eyes and look at the land. Right? But that doesn't seem to be what Hashem is telling him. Hashem here tells him, you're going to go to the land I will show you, which seems to imply that Hashem is going to give Avram directions.
Yes.
Right?
Because it doesn't say he was safe to everybody.
So why didn't Hashem give Avram directions?
I mean, we didn't.
We don't see anything in the Torah about Hashem giving Avram directions.
Yeah, but...
don't you think that's an important detail the Torah should have given us?
It's like there was clouds.
A second problem. What?
There was clouds. Also, I have a question. It might be the question we're about to ask. Why doesn't he write so many things about him?
Well, we're about to touch on that. So the second problem is that Avram doesn't actually seem to have listened to Hashem's command. Hashem tells Avram three things. I want you to leave your land, your birthplace, and your father's home. So his land and his birthplace, there are different opinions exactly what that means. He was born in Ur-Kasdim, then he traveled to a new place, Haran, and that was the land that he was in now. So he left both Ur-Kasdim and Haran. But the third condition Hashem made with him is you should leave your father's home, which seems to mean, when you look at the pasuk, it means that he's supposed to leave his family. But instead, what does Avram do? He takes his nephew with him, right? He takes his nephew Lot for the journey. Now, obviously, his wife Sarah he's going to take with him. Of course, his wife is like part of your body. It's your own. It's not your immediate family. But why is he taking his nephew? Who told him to take his nephew with him? So, there was an old man who davened in the shul of the Brisker of, and he was getting older and older, and it was hard for him to maintain the cleanliness of his body. Right? It happens to older people. And there were times when he was in shul davening, and it would begin to smell around him. Oh. Now, besides for the fact that it was unpleasant, there are also halachas about davening in the vicinity of a bad smell. And the other people in shul had to move away. They were to clear out an area around him. They have to start figuring out exactly how far away from him do they need to move. And this would happen every so often in shul. And people in shul started to get annoyed at this, right? This guy comes and he creates an unpleasant... What? Who is the man? You want me to tell you his name? I don't want to say Lashon Hara.
Oh,
So he was an elderly person who was out in the shul of the Brisker of. So they went to the Brisker of and they started asking how far do we need to stand. And the Brisker of told them all the halachas, all the chumras, where they have to stand. And after a few days, they say, let's just tell him to stop coming to shul. He's not supposed to come to shul like this, right? It's not the right thing to do. And the Brisker of says, chas v'shalom, you're going to go over and embarrass him, shame him, humiliate him. And they say, yeah, but there's a lot of halachas about, you're not allowed to do such things in shul, right? The shul has to be a clean place. And he says, of course there are halachas about the cleanliness of a shul. But there are also halachas about respecting another person and kavod habriyos, right? And obviously, if there's a bad smell, you move away. But that doesn't give you a right to embarrass somebody. Next week, the 10th of Cheshvan, is the yahrzeit of the Chabiner Rav. The Shabina Rav Doiv Berish Wiedenfeld. He was originally a rabbi in the city of Chepin in Poland, and later after the Holocaust, he moved to Yerushalayim. And he was known for his tremendous patience and tolerance towards all those around. Right? This one of the stories told that he had a neighbor who suffered a lot during the Holocaust, and he was kind of alone. He lost his family, and he used to come every day and pour out his heart, tell over his story to the Shabina Rav. And he would spend half an hour a day talking to him, and Shabina Rav would listen very carefully, very patiently. And someone once told the Shabina Rav, your time is very precious, your time is very important, and this neighbor is every day he spends an hour telling you all his sodas. He already told you his sodas yesterday. Why doesn't he tell it to you again? Right? You tell him that you're busy, right? Tell him you should find a therapist, and right, So the Shabina Rav says, listen, if my elderly neighbor was carrying a heavy load of bricks, and I saw he was struggling to hold up the bricks, wouldn't I run to help him carry the load?
Oh.
So he said, if that's true when you're carrying a load of bricks on his shoulder, how much more so when he's carrying a load of bricks on his heart, right? Shouldn't I help him carry the load of bricks on his heart? Another story that's told about the Shabina Rav, this is a story we said in the past, that one Shabbos afternoon, he was taking a Shabbos afternoon nap, and there's a knock on the door. Okay. So he goes to the door, and there's this little boy there, and he says, Rabbi, I need someone to help me review my Mishnayos I learned in school. And he says, little boy, it's Shabbos afternoon, right? People go to sleep Shabbos afternoon. You shouldn't really go around knocking on people's doors, especially, you had no appointment over here. You didn't tell me you're going to come before. It's not right to knock on people's doors Shabbos afternoon. Why not, says the boy. He says, because people go to sleep Shabbos afternoon. So he says, no, that's not rabbis. Rabbis don't go to sleep Shabbos afternoon. Rabbis stay up the whole Shabbos afternoon learning Torah. You're right, says the Shabina Rav. And at that moment, he decided that he's never going to go to sleep again Shabbos afternoon. And if this little boy says that, so he says to the little boy, why are you coming here to learn Mishnayos with me? So he says, well, we're having a test in school next week, and my Rebbe said that we should review the Mishnayos over Shabbos. So I told my Rebbe that my father's out of town and that he's not able to review with me. So my Rebbe said I should find, if my father's out of town, I should find a neighbor who can review it with me. So you're my neighbor, so I came to review with you. So he was about to tell this boy, he was about to rip into this boy and tell him how to respect people around him. But then he said, I've never in my life sent someone away who came to me for help. Somebody who needed help from me, who wanted to spend time with me. I've never sent anybody away, especially if they're coming to learn Torah. So he said, okay, let's sit down and let's learn. I think it was a Mishnah, or maybe a Gemara he was learning. And he later when he said over the story, he said, I learned this, whether it was a page in Gemara or Mishnah, whatever it was, I learned this Mishnah more times than there are hairs in my beard. But I've never understood so many chidushim, so many novel, innovative ideas as I did that Shabbos when I learned it with that boy. A third story that's told over with him, with the Shabina Rav, one might say Shabbos after davening, after they finished davening in shul, so everybody's leaving in shul, and people came by to wish good vach to the Shabina Rav. And amongst the people who came by was a man by the name of Baruch Yitzchak Frank. He was a very prominent asken in Yerushalayim. And he passed by the Shabina Rav, and the Shabina Rav said to him, do you have a few moments, a few minutes? I need to speak to you about something privately after everybody leaves. So he said, of course. So Baruch Yitzchak Frank waited till everybody had finished wishing the Shabina Rav good vach and had left the shul, and then he sat down to speak with him. And it turns out there was a boy who was also in line, saying good vach to Shabina Rav, and he overheard this discussion, and he was curious, right? The Shabina Rav told Frank, that he wants to talk to him about something private. He figures he wants to know what it's about. So he goes over to the Svarim Shank at the side of the shul. He pulls out a Gemara. He sits down a few benches away. He opens the Gemara and he makes like he's learning, right? He's steiging away and he's trying to listen in what they're talking about. So the Shabina Rav turns to Rav Baruch Yitzchak Frank and he says, "No, where do you live now?" And he tells him where he lives. How's your apartment? How many rooms do you have? He starts telling him about the apartment. No, you're happy there? Yeah, of course. Well, what about your neighbors? Who lives next to you? And he starts telling him about his neighbors. He starts asking if everyone's okay. And this boy is sitting there. He wants to hear some juicy news, but it doesn't seem to be very, very interesting. But he waits. He waits for like 10 minutes, and they're talking about their neighbors, about the neighborhood, about people who live there. And finally, after 10 minutes, the boy realizes he's not going to hear anything interesting over here, so he puts the Gemara back and he leaves. And then the Shvina Rav turns to Rabbi Frank and he says, "Oh, now we could talk about the private matter that I wanted to discuss with you." So Rabbi Frank realizes what's going on. He says, "You waited 10 minutes for that boy? Why didn't you just tell him to leave?" So he says, "Never in my life did I tell somebody to leave. Somebody who was next to me, I never turned to somebody next to me and said, leave. Right? Go away. Right? How can I turn to another person and say, go away? I have to do something, you go away." And we all face times when there's somebody around us who is, getting on our nerves a little bit, right? Somebody around us who's stopping us from doing what we want to do, right? And they're starting to get a bit annoying. And we have a choice. We could turn to the other person and say, "Get out of here," or we could say, we'll take the time. We're not going to send somebody away. I'll talk about other things until he leaves, and then once he leaves, I'll be able to move on and do what I wanted to do. Right? In the Gemara, the image of tolerance and patience was Hillel Hazaken. Right? The Gemara tells us how patient he was with everybody who came to him with questions. Right? Shammai was pushing everybody away with a stick, and Hillel was ready to listen to everybody, right? We know one of the famous stories the Gemara tells us about the guy who comes to Hillel, and he comes to Shammai, and he says, I want to become a Jew, I want to learn about the Torah, but how many Torahs do you have? And Shammai says, well, there's two parts of the Torah. There's the written Torah, and there's the oral Torah. So he says, I don't believe in the oral Torah. I only like the written Torah. Can you teach me the written Torah? So Shammai picks up his stick and he says, right, Arois. So, okay, he already knows. He knows that he asks around and he finds out that there's a rabbi with a little more patience, and they send him to Hillel. And he goes to Hillel and he says to Hillel, how many Torahs are there? Hillel says there's the written Torah and there's the oral Torah. So he says, I don't believe in the oral Torah, right? It's not written down anywhere. The rabbis are just making it all up. I only want to read the written Torah. Can you teach me the written Torah? So Hillel says, you want to learn the written Torah? Of course, but in order to know the written Torah, you first have to learn how to read. Okay, wonderful, I'll learn how to read. So let me teach you the Aleph base. So he takes out an Aleph base chart and he starts. He says, he shows him the first letter. This shows him the Aleph. This is an Aleph. This is a base. This is a Gimel. This is a Dalet. Wonderful. He goes through all the letters, and the guy learns all the letters. Very excited. He goes home at the end of the day. He learned all the Aleph base. Right? Comes back the next morning. He comes to Hillel and Hillel says, no, today it's time to review. He pulls out the Aleph base chart. This time he flips the chart upside down. He points to the Tuf. He says, this is an Aleph. Right? He points to the Shin. This is a base. And the guy's like, no. You told me yesterday different letters. You're changing things up over here. So Hillel says, what do you mean? What letter is this? He says, I don't know. Yesterday you told me one thing. Today you told me something else. Hillel says, understand, you're relying on me to tell you what it means? So he says, of course, I don't know how to read, right? I'm relying on you to tell me. So he says, well, if you're relying on me to tell you how to read the Torah, shouldn't you rely on me to tell you how to understand the Torah, right? The oral Torah is the tradition passed down by the rabbis to teach us how to understand the Torah. If you don't even know how to read the Torah, you don't even know the names of the letters, right? How can you imagine that you're going to be able to understand the depth of the Torah without learning the oral Torah? Yes. Okay, you can give it to me. So the Gemara tells us that Hillel was known for his patience and how tolerant he was towards everybody. And the Gemara says, this is a very famous story, that there were two people who lived in Hillel's neighborhood. One guy's telling his friend, Hillel, he's so patient, so tolerant. He's never gotten angry. He's never yelled at anybody all of his life. And his friend's like, come on, I'm sure he must have gotten angry sometime. And he says, nope, never happened. He never got mad. Really, it's impossible. Everybody gets angry once in a while. He says, you want to bet? And he says, yeah, let's make a bet. He says, if you can make Hillel angry, I'll give you 400 zuz. He says, okay, wonderful. I'll make Hillel angry. I'll give you, and if I don't manage to make him angry, I'll give you 400 zuz. Fine. So now he has to make Hillel angry. What does he do to make Hillel angry? So he decides he has to find a very stressful time, a very time when it's gonna be easy to to annoy and upset Hillel. So he decides he's gonna wait till Friday afternoon. Right? Friday afternoon, he waits a couple hours before Shabbos. Hillel's busy getting ready for Shabbos, and Hillel goes into the bath. As Hillel's sitting in the bath, there's a loud knocking on the door. Is this the house of Hillel? Right? Does Hillel live here? And Hillel's in the bath, and he's like, yes, is everything okay? He says, I have a question for you. Okay, you have a question for me? Hillel gets out of the bath, he puts on his towel, his robe, and he comes out, and he says, if you're coming Friday afternoon with a question, it must be, I'm sure it's a very important question. Tell me, my son, how can I help you? What's your question? So he says, I was wondering, why do the Babylonians have such round heads? Why do the Babylonians have such round heads? And Hillel's like, that is a very interesting question, says Hillel. Right? So actually the shape of the head is when a baby is first born, the head is still very soft, and you can actually shape the head. And the midwives in Babylonia actually try to shape the head to be round. Perhaps they're not. Hillel says it's not like the best thing, but that's the way they do it. The midwives aren't taught properly. They try to shape the head to be round. Okay, thank you very much. That was a good answer, Hillel. Have a good day. Have a good Shabbos. Right? He leaves the house. Hillel goes back into the bath, and he waits 5 minutes till Hillel's back in the bath, and again he bangs on the door. Is this Hillel's house? Does Hillel live here? And Hillel's like, Hillel again gets out of the bath. He comes to the door, and he says, how can I help you, my son? He says, I have another question. Another question? Okay, sure. Love to hear your question. Come inside. They sit down. And he says, the Palmyrians, the people who live in the Tadmor Desert, why do they have such red eyes? So Hillel says, son, that's a very interesting question. I think it's because the desert wind is constantly blowing sand into their eyes. That's a good answer. Hey, Hillel, thank you so much. Have a good Shabbos. He goes outside, and again Hillel gets back into the bath. And 5 minutes later, there's another knock on the door. Is this Hillel's house? Does he live here? And Hillel gets out of the bath again, puts on his robe, and he says, how can I help you? I have another question. That must be a really important question, right? You're coming Friday afternoon, taking me out of my bath. Sure, come in and ask your question. He says, why do the Africans have such wide feet? And Hillel says, that's an interesting question. It's probably because they walk barefoot in the marshes, in the swampy areas, so wider, flatter feet helps them walk better. It's a wonderful answer. Hillel, thank you so much for explaining it to me. And have a good Shabbos. And he leaves. And as he's about to leave, Hillel turns to him and he says, do you have any more questions? And he says, the truth is I have a lot of questions, Hillel, but I'm a little nervous. I'm afraid you're going to become angry with me. You might yell at me if I ask any more questions. And Hillel says, no, I would never get upset. Take your time, sit down. Let's sit down together. I'll bring out something to drink. I want some coffee or something. Whatever questions you want, I'm here to answer all your questions. And he says, okay, I have one question. Are you really Hillel? Are you the famous Hillel that everybody says you're the Prince of Israel and you're so patient and you never get angry? And Hillel says, yes, I am Hillel. And he says, well, in that case, I hope there's no one else like you. There should never be people like you. So Hillel says, well, look upset about something. There's something bothering you. How can I help you? And he says, it's all your fault. Because of you, I lost 400 shekels. I made a bet with my friend that I could make you angry, and because of your patience, I lost 400 shekels. And Hillel says, it's certainly, I wouldn't be happy if I would lose 400 shekels either, but it's better to lose 400 shekels and another 400 shekels than to lose your temper and get angry at somebody. Right? So, obviously, Hillel is an extreme example. Right? If somebody comes pulls me out of the shower 3 times Shabbos afternoon, I probably wouldn't respond the same way Hillel did. But we all have situations in our life when there's somebody who's around us who comes and asks some silly questions of us. Right? And we have a choice. We can tell them, go fly a kite, get out of here. Or we can actually sit down and try to treat them with respect and take some time, spend some time with them. And this, says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, is what's happening with Avraham Avinu. Hashem comes to Avraham Avinu and he says, Avraham, I am going to give you directions and direct you to a special land, to La'aretz Asher Areka, but there are 3 conditions. You have to leave your land, your birthplace, and your family. And Avraham says, of course, Hashem, I'm willing to do everything for Hashem. Hashem promised him great blessings for it, right? You're going to be a great nation. So Avram goes home. He tells Sarah, we're packing our stuff. We have to say goodbye to everybody. We're leaving. Avram goes to his father-in-law, to his father, to his father's house. He goes to Terach and he says goodbye to Terach. Hashem told me I have to leave. He says goodbye to all of his brothers, his family, and he's getting ready to go. And as Avram is packing up his stuff, there's a knock on the door. And who's standing at the door? His nephew, Lot. And Lot's like, no, where are we going? Uncle Avram, I'm here. And Avram's like, no, Lot, you don't understand. Hashem's sending me on a special mission. Excellent, I'm joining. I want to join this mission too. And Avram says, you don't understand. Hashem told me I have to leave my family behind. And Lot's like, great, I also want to leave my family behind. Let's both leave our families behind together. Let's go. And Avram's like, yeah, but Hashem said I have to leave my house, my land, my family. And Lot's like, great, I'm coming with you. We're both leaving our land, our everything. And Avram's like, this guy doesn't get a hint, right? What do I do? On one hand, I want to fulfill Hashem's command. I have a mitzvah to do, right? Hashem told me to leave my family behind. On the other hand, how can I turn to my nephew, who's so excited to come with me, and tell him, you can't come, go away? I can't do that. So Avram says, listen, I can't send Lot away, says the Orach Chaim. I'm going to have to, obviously I have to send Lot away because Hashem told me to, but I have to figure out a way to separate from Lot without offending him, without embarrassing him. Now, if that means it's going to take another few months before Hashem reveals himself to me, so be it. I'm not going to chase my nephew away and offend and embarrass him, make him upset, just because I want to speak to Hashem a little bit sooner. So Avram allowed Lot to join him. They traveled all the way to Eretz. So Hashem did not reveal himself to Avram. The Orach Chaim says Hashem was waiting. Hashem was saying, when is Lot going to leave? Right? And Hashem did not reveal himself to Avram. Avram came to Eretz Yisrael. He went down to Egypt, came back to Eretz Yisrael. And then finally, a little fight broke out between Lot's shepherds and Avram's shepherds. And Avram said, now it's a good opportunity for me to separate from Lot without offending him. So he goes to Lot. He says, I love you so much. Out of my great love for you, I don't want there to be any friction between our shepherds. Maybe we should separate and go to different places. And this way he was able to separate from Lot without offending Lot, without upsetting Lot. And the moment Lot left, what does the Torah tell us? Hashem appeared to Avram as soon as Lot departed, and he said, lift up your eyes and see the land that I'm giving you. Right? So Hashem was waiting, right, for Lot to leave. And Avram said, I know Hashem is waiting. Avram knew that Hashem is waiting for Lot to leave. But Avram said, I'm willing to wait and push off this great vision, this great revelation of Hashem, but I'm not going to tell Lot to leave. I'm not going to upset my nephew. Right? And we might look at this and think, maybe Avraham made a mistake, right? Who said it was a good thing that he did. But the Zohar comes along, and we see further in the Parsha, right? The Parsha tells us that there was a big war fought, according to the Zohar, the whole war between the 4 and the 5 kings were all fighting over Lot. Why were they fighting over Lot? Because the Zohar says that Lot had the neshama of Mashiach, right? Mashiach ben David was a child of Lot, right? A descendant of Lot, and that's what the battle was going on. And Avram allowing Lot to join him is what allowed the Lot to be rescued. First of all, if Lot would have stayed behind, right, Avram would not have been able to rescue him when the kings attacked him. And that's what enabled the soul of Mashiach to be born. This patience, this tolerance that Avram had. And to conclude with the final story, in the year 1853, there's a large Jewish community in Mainz, Germany. Mainz, I don't know how it's pronounced. And they had a big shul, and they were renovating the shul. And many of the Jews in Mainz were very modern Jews, and they decided they wanted to install some musical instruments, a big organ in the shul. And obviously, the more Orthodox members of the shul were not happy with this, and they ended up splitting and opening a new shul, a new Orthodox shul in Mainz. What? Yes, they're using on Shabbos. And they had to find a rav, they had to find a rabbi. So they hired a young rabbi whose name was Meir Lehman. Was known as his German name was Marcus Lehman. And Marcus Lehman, at that time he was a young man, but he would later become one of the leading Orthodox rabbis in Germany. And he also became known as a very famous and well-known author. He published many, many books on Jewish history. He published the whole story of Rabbi Akiva, the story of Reinu Gershon, the Maharam of Rottenburg, the daughter of the Shach. He actually, Kahas, the Chabad publishing house, actually published, I think, 5 of his books. I got it for my son a few years ago. I already read the 5 novelettes, it's called. Right? The Adopted Princess, The Unpaid Ransom, right? So he was a very prolific author, wrote many books, but he also wrote many short stories, and he wrote a few stories about himself. So one of the stories he writes...
Who is it?
This is a story about Rabbi Marcus Lehman. He writes a story about himself. It's unclear whether it's completely true. A lot of his stories are a bit embellished. He adds a lot of details. It seems like it was based on a true story, and he probably, some stories grow a long beard, as they say, right? So he writes like this. He writes that he had an important meeting. He had to meet with the German Minister of Education in Berlin. And he was supposed to go with 2 other leaders of the Jewish community of Mainz, and they were supposed to travel to Berlin together to meet the Minister of Education. Right? There was a lot at stake. It was a very, very important meeting, and of course, he made sure to get ready early, and go out to the train station to go catch the train. And as he's putting on his coat and going to the door, he hears some knocking on the door. And he hears knocking on the door, and there's an unfamiliar voice in the hallway asking to see him. And his wife, who had opened the door, said, "I'm sorry, my husband's in a big rush. He's traveling to Berlin. He has a train to catch in 30 minutes. And come back tomorrow."
Oh, I know what's going on.
And the guy says, the elderly person who's standing there says, "No, I can't come back tomorrow. It's a matter of life and death. A matter of life and death. Sakonas nevashos." Okay, so when Rabbi Lehman heard this, he said, okay, he called the guy in. He said, "Listen, I have a train to catch in 30 minutes. If you can make it 2 minutes or less, a matter of life and death, tell me what the problem is very quickly. I need to leave." So he said, "Of course, Rabbi, but first, Shalom Aleichem, my dear Rabbi. Do you recognize me?" And he says, "No, I'm sorry, I don't recognize you." He looks at this elderly person. "I don't recognize you. Never met." He says, "Just last year, I attended one of your drushes, one of your sermons. It was amazing. It was the greatest speech I ever heard in my life. As a matter of fact, I could tell you the whole speech by heart. I memorized the whole. You want me to tell you the whole speech by heart? No. I don't have any time for speeches. I need you to get to your point. It's a matter of life and death. I have a train to catch. Please tell me what you're here about." "Oh, of course. I'm not going to take up any more time than I need to from such a prominent rabbi who gives such beautiful sermons. But let me tell you my problem. See, 30 years ago, when I was a young man, I was looking to get married. I spent a lot of time looking for a shidduch. It was very hard to find a shidduch, but Baruch Hashem, I found a beautiful girl, right? And we got married. It was amazing. I have the most wonderful wife. We had such a Mom is an amazing shidduch. And he says, I don't need to hear about your shidduch from 30 years ago. Maybe you can tell me what you're here for right now. And he says, oh, listen, I'm getting to it. I have to give you some background to this story. So me and my wife got married 30 years ago, and Hashem blessed us with 4 beautiful children. We had 2 sons and 2 daughters, and we had such nachas from our children. They're such wonderful children. Rabbi, let me tell you about my children. I don't have time to hear about your children. I need to go to the train station. Okay, fine. I'm moving. Don't worry, we're getting to it. So me and my wife lived together happily for 25 years, but unfortunately, 5 years ago, Rabbi, my wife passed away. Oy vey, says Marcus Lehman, Baruch Dayan Emes, I'm so sorry for your loss, but this is not a matter of life and death. I can't bring your wife back. Right? And I have to go to the train station. And he says, no, it's not about my wife. It's a different life that's in danger. No, so get to the point. Okay, so my wife passed away, and my son, my oldest son, had moved to America. And he asked me, he thought maybe if I travel to America, move to a new place, it'll help me overcome get over the loss. So he invited me to come travel to America, and I traveled. I went to America a couple of years ago, 2 years ago. And I lived in America for 1 year, but I wasn't very happy there, Rabbi. It wasn't like Jewish life in Germany. Jewish life in America is not what it's supposed to be. The Jews there are way too modern. I didn't like it there, so I decided to come back. And last year I came back. 1 year ago I came back to Germany. Very nice, says Rabbi Lehman, and he's looking at his watch, and he's like, maybe you can hurry up the story a little faster. And he says, sure, Rabbi, listen. So as soon as I came back to Germany, l'chaim, I got the amazing news. My daughter gave birth to a baby boy, and I came back just in time for the bris. And I was so excited. My grandson's bris, and my son-in-law and my daughter gave me the honor of being the sandik. They wanted to honor me with being the sandik at the bris. And I was so excited I was going to be a sandik at my grandson's bris. But then a terrible tragedy took place. The night before the bris, the baby passed away. Okay, Rabbi Lehman says, I'm very sorry for your loss a second time, Baruch Dayan Emes, but I can't bring back someone who passed away already. It's not a matter of life and death. And he says, no, Rabbi, we're getting to it. He says, can you please hurry up, right? I have a train to catch. And he says, okay, listen. That was a year ago. Last week, my daughter had another son. And the bris is supposed to be tomorrow morning. Oh. And they asked me if I could be the sandik. But I have a big problem. Last time I wanted to be the sandik, right? What happened? Chas v'shalom. I don't even want to say what happened. And me, I'm a little nervous. My daughter's nervous. My son-in-law's nervous. A lot of people in the family are very nervous. I don't know if I should be the sandik or not. So Rabbi Lehman says, listen, if that's the problem, he says, halachically, there's no reason to hold back. But if you're nervous and your whole family is nervous, I would advise you not to be the sandik, just so you should be calmer at the bris. And he picks up a suitcase and he starts walking out the door. And the guy calls out, no, Rabbi, one more question. Okay, what's one more question? He says, well, last year they wanted to name the baby. They wanted to name the baby Yitzchak Shloima. And I want to know if it's okay to give the same name. We don't really want to give the same name. So we have to choose a new name. Maybe you could advise us on what name to choose for the baby. And he says, what name to choose? Maybe call him whatever you want. You can call him Avram, Baruch, Chaim, David, Micha, Yeruchim, Zerach. And he walks out of the door. He says goodbye. And he rushes. He grabs a wagon. He stops the wagon to take him to the train station. He says, listen, I'm going to pay you very well. And I'll pay you very well if you can get me to the train in time. They rush and they get to the train station as the train begins to move. Right? He missed the train. And the two other community leaders who were there waiting for him, they run over. They say, what's going on? How did you miss it? And he tells them the whole story. They're not too upset. They start laughing at the story. This guy's this whole story is a bit amusing, but they're not very happy. They missed their meeting. So they look. The next train is leaving in 2 hours. So they're going to come back in 2 hours. 2 hours later, they come back to the train station, and there's a big commotion. There's wagons and people. Cops are standing around. What happened? The previous train got into an accident, derailed, and many people, chas v'shalom, were killed. Right? And he turns to other rabbis. Hashem obviously sent Eliyahu Hanavi to save us, right? They ended up taking the next train 2 hours later. And when they got to Berlin, the Minister of Education was so nervous. He thought he heard the train crashed. He was so excited to see them. And when he heard the story, he also was very amused by the story. And he says, our meeting went, we were all so happy by it and also so excited by what happened that our meeting was much more productive than I could have ever imagined it would be. And I was thankful to Hashem for sending Eliyahu Hanavi to save me. At least that's what I thought happened. Until a few years later, I was traveling around to the cities around Mainz, and after I gave I was coming to give a drasha somewhere, and there's a whole line of people waiting to see me, and guess who? They're standing there, this old man, and he rushes over, and he's like, "Oh, Rabbi, it's so nice to see you again. Let me tell you, I still remember that drasha you gave 3-4 years ago. I'm trying to tell you the whole drasha by heart." And he says, "Listen, maybe I would like to hear some of the drasha by heart. I have a little more time now." "Okay, sure, Rabbi. I'll tell you the whole thing, Rabbi. But first, I want you to meet my grandson. Avram, Baruch, Chaim, David, Micha, Yerucham, Zera." Right? And, right? So you told that. You got so many names. So you told me to name him. Right? So, of course, we have to realize, the lesson that we have to realize is that there are going to be times in our life, right, when we have a train to catch, when we feel like we're in a rush, when we feel like we have something to get done, we're waiting for a revelation from Hashem, we're waiting to catch a train, we want to take a good nap Shabbos afternoon, and then there's this person who's a bit annoying, smells a little bit, and he needs a little bit of our time, right? And we have to decide, are we going to tell them, "Get out of here, I have something more important to do"?
Get out.
Right? Or are we going to say, "Listen, I don't want to offend another person. Whatever train I need to catch is going to wait a little bit. The revelation of Hashem could wait a little bit, but I'm not going to send away another Jew." And if we do that, so first of all, as we see with this story, someone who takes this approach has tremendous protection from Hashem, for himself, for the other two Jewish community leaders, and as we see in the story of Aram, that's ultimately the fact that Avraham was patient and took light with him is what ultimately led to saving the neshama of Mashiach.
Why? How did it save it?